Hey, this is Madeline Sklar.
And Suze Cooper, and you're listening to All Things Audio. Let's start with some Spaces news. So, spotted this during the week. There was a post that came out that was talking about the first client council meeting. This is of the new management team over at X. They basically gave out a list of the different things that they're working on, a little bit of a roadmap. And of course, as ever, I was sifting through it, trying to find something that would be Spaces related. It actually came along with a video which caused more hype than it should have done because it had some tweets in there that shouldn't have been in there. Deep in there, somewhere, they did actually show Spaces in the video. They were basically saying that you'll be able to listen to Spaces in the docked player while engaging in the app. Now, Madeline, this isn't new, right? So I'm wondering whether they're going to kind of enhance it in some way. And if they are, what do we think they might do with it? I mean, it is something we can do, right?
Yeah, when we're on mobile right now, we're in Spaces, we can just minimize the screen and be doing other things while we're listening, whether you're live or the replay. I'm wondering if it's more about the new thing I know of with a docked player is for videos on X. So if you're watching a video, whether it's a live stream or just some recorded video, you can have a docked player. So you see it, there's the little icon, you tap on it, and now it puts it on the side of the screen so you can be scrolling through. That's all I know that's new, that's like a docked screen. So but yeah, we've been able to do this in Spaces for a while.
Exactly. I mean, in this little kind of video that they've put together, they basically show someone going into a space and then minimizing the space and DMing someone on mobile. So, you know, you're still listening, but you're DMing. Now, yes, we can do that. I'm always a little bit hesitant about doing that, particularly if I'm hosting a space, because I'm always worried that I'm going to close the space or shut it down or jump out of it if I'm listening by doing that. So perhaps their thinking behind this is making that UI a little bit easier to access the other parts of the app from the space so that when it's minimized, you're not so concerned about that. The other stuff that the video showed, out of the list of things, I think there are only two that we haven't really seen or experienced as yet. One of those was in-stream payments, which we spoke about a couple of weeks ago about the whole one-tap tipping that you could do potentially from Spaces. So that's one of the things that they're looking at. And also shopping, which is something obviously Instagram went crazy over. And Elon's obviously got his eye on that idea as well. But again, neither of those are particularly audio-based. But out of the full list of things, they were the two that I thought, well, we've not really seen those before. But everything else on the list seemed to be something they'd either trialled before or was already there. One of the changes that we have seen this week is that video has appeared on what was once known as the spacebar, right? I mean, we can't call it the spacebar. Now it's got video on it.
Used to be the Fleets bar. Remember when it was called?
Long time ago.
Fleets. I miss Fleets. That was such a great feature. It was the Fleets bar, then the Spaces bar. Yeah, this is new. This started last week. Now, we heard this was coming, and I'd seen a screenshot a while back showing an example. So they're really pushing live streaming on the X platform. And so they want to be able to show that up in the home feed on mobile where we normally see Spaces with the purple bubbles. Well, now you probably have noticed there's a pink one. It's only going to happen if somebody you follow is hosting or speaking or maybe even attending a live stream that is live right now on the X platform. I just started noticing it last week. I'm like, oh, this is cool. But again, it all depends on how many people you're following that are using this. And not very many people are using live streaming on this platform. They use YouTube. They do live on TikToks and Instagram. I think it'll take some time, but I think we will start seeing that more and more here. And with these UI enhancements, again, they have it now where you can dock it so that you can still be on mobile and doing other things and it's off to the side and out of the way. They're doing high definition now, so the quality is really good. So it's super interesting. Have you seen any of these out in the wild yet? Because I'm starting to see it more and more.
Yeah, I've seen a couple of them. It definitely makes it very easy to differentiate what's audio and what's video. It's a bright pink colour up in that bar, isn't it? I guess it's the media bar now, right?
You can't miss it. You can't miss it with that pink.
Exactly. So it's right there. And I think some of the broadcasters have actually had a go at it. Was it CNN had one running the other day?
Yeah, I've seen that too. We're like big ones.
Yeah, and we've not seen news providers and publishers really come back to Spaces since Elon took over. I mean, obviously he upset an awful lot of journalists along the way, and maybe that explains some of it. But, you know, some of them seem to be coming back with the advent of this video feature. So perhaps it really will see a bit more busyness up there on the now media bar.
I see 3 of them right now. The White House is doing one. If you're here with us live or replay, what you can do is just on mobile, minimize the top left right above the record button, and then go to the home feed and look at the top. Like right now, I see there's one with Biden, so it's POTUS account, one with the White House account. So they're probably just live streaming, they're just showing it separately. And then somebody else I see another one next to it, Wonder Woman Wednesday. But again, it goes back to who you follow that is connected to that. So you might not see any of this. But it's interesting and it does stand out. And I think this is going to get more discovery for live streams. And I think that's a good thing because I'm really excited about live streaming here. I've been testing it, playing around with it. I think this will start encouraging more people to use it.
Yeah, and if it's not live streaming that's going on at X at the moment, it's live calling, right? This is the next thing that we're going to be talking about. Once again, there's a bit more information on these live calls. Madeline, you found a couple of posts this week about it, haven't you?
Yeah, we've mentioned this recently a few times because we keep seeing these screenshots of here's what X is working on, this new service with video and audio calls over in the DMs, very much like WhatsApp. We know Elon wants to turn this into the everything app. So this is no surprise to me that it's trying to be something for everyone where you don't have to leave to go to other platforms for that 1 or 2 things. I like to go to YouTube for videos, for long form video. They're trying to change, I guess, our mentality of what we use these other platforms for. So I find this interesting with having this ability coming soon to have these live calls, whether it's audio or video. This is the first time in this new tweet that came out or post today that's calling it XCalls. Did you see that? It's the first time it's referenced at XCalls. That's kind of cool.
That's probably it, isn't it? Surely that's what it's going to be called.
I think so. They probably saw that written somewhere in their little reverse coding thing they do to uncover all these things. But what's interesting is they're working on Android first. So I thought, okay, hopefully it'll be iOS pretty soon. But we don't know when this is coming out. But in this post, the guy does say they are working rapidly on it. So don't be surprised if by the time we meet back here next week that it's already available. You and I will definitely test this when it becomes available because that'll be fun. Especially, when you're in other countries and it's like, oh, I can just ring her up on X.
Yeah, that would be pretty cool. I mean, you and I may well be able to test it out, but as Matt Navarra's post explains, potentially this will be a premium subscriber-only feature. So you and I can test it out because we do pay for the premium features on the platform, but it's not going to be available to everyone.
It sure sounds that way. This article was the first I've heard of that. Nobody else has, because it's not available yet. All we know so far is just based on that reverse engineering of the code that, this is being worked on. So we know it's something that's most likely coming soon. But in this article that Matt Navarra shared from TechCrunch, they're saying that this is going to be a premium subscriber only. So is this going to get more people to subscribe and be a premium X account versus not? And then we heard last week or the week before, Elon's talking about having everybody pay and not having it be free anymore. We just don't know for sure what. But this could be a good reason. If somebody's on the fence about being a premium subscriber, this might be a good reason to do it because I think that'd be pretty awesome that you can use this platform and not have to go to WhatsApp or somewhere else if you want to have a live audio or video call with somebody.
Yeah, I don't know that it would be enough to make me pay the premium just for that, though, when I could go to another app and do it without paying.
Right, because they're free.
I pay for the premium because I want the bookmarks, and it's a lot of money to pay per month just because I want the bookmarks. I really don't think I would pay for it just for the calls side of it. So if he is hanging it on that, I guess he's not. What he's doing is he's trying to stuff the app full of stuff that people then feel like that premium layer is worth paying for. But I don't know. I don't know if it's going to work.
Yeah, I don't think by itself that's worth it because, right, you can go to WhatsApp or some of these others and have it for free. I think it just goes back to becoming the everything app, making it so that there is no reason to leave. Why would I need to go over to WhatsApp? First of all, when I have used WhatsApp in the past, I don't very often, but when I have, it's specifically to do an audio call with somebody who's overseas because it's free, right? But if I could do that on X, then I don't have to leave to go to WhatsApp or somewhere else where I want to do this one particular thing. That's enticing to me, and maybe that will be to others. So I think it's more of, here's an extra feature that will make life easier. Because, I don't think somebody's going to go, oh, let me go sign up for X and pay $8 a month because now I can do these premium or do these video and audio calls as a premium subscriber. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. But I think it's just, here's an extra benefit to being a subscriber.
Right, let's move on and talk Clubhouse now. Paul Davison, one of the founders of Clubhouse, sent out a tweet a little while ago, actually, but I only came across it this week. And it's a great thread. It's off the back of the whole relaunch and chats now being introduced into the app. And the actual link that we're sharing in the Nest is the blog where they launched it. But what I hadn't realised was that Paul has actually answered these top FAQs about chats and about the change. They're all quite top level stuff, but it's quite interesting. One of them, he does answer the question, is Clubhouse dead? He says, not yet. At Clubhouse, we root for our friends to succeed and we bet on our team any day. We have years of runway in the bank and millions of active users. We are going to stay heads down building. So quite interesting to hear his take on that. But it also answers a lot of other FAQs, things that perhaps I've heard while I've been in and out of chats when people were leaving messages for one another to try and work out the app and trying to work out sort of where it was heading. Things like, are live rooms still a thing? How are people using chats? How can we join the chat? Why? Why have we got voice notes in this app? I mean, a whole list of them. I quite liked his answer to why do all the AI chat previews for the different messages say that things are thrilling. And he actually responded to that one saying, well, the AI prompt that they're using asks the descriptions to be created in the tone of movie trailers. So actually the AI is clearly doing its job and has fulfilled the brief, but everything is apparently thrilling. It's an interesting thread to read if you're interested in why they've created chats and to see where Clubhouse is at. Clearly he doesn't think it's over yet.
Yeah, and I don't think it is either. We know a lot of people left the platform, but I do like the new things that are going on over there. And it'll just be interesting to see, can they get more people using it? But they still have a pretty good base there, right? There's still a lot of people that use it.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I've not been on there as much as I was on there this time last week, but there seem to be a lot of old voices that I've heard that have at least come back to try out what it is. And other people coming on to try it out who hadn't used Clubhouse before. I've come across a few of those as well. So I think it's a really interesting idea. It wasn't what we expected to happen. Nobody really knew what direction they could take it in. But I think it's got as good a chance as any to kind of take what they had and recreate it for a post-COVID world. Because let's face it, it worked, and it worked because of the times we were in. And they know that. They're well aware of that. And in order to move forward, they do need to change it radically because our lives have changed radically again. Thankfully, we're all back out there. We're all back able to talk to one another in real life. And that makes the use case for an app like Clubhouse obsolete in a way because we don't need to rely on that anymore like we did have to. So I think, good on them for going back to the drawing board, going, right, what can we do with this now? What does the world look like now? And what might be not even useful to people, but fun for people? I mean, heaven forbid that we might not just go on there and have a laugh, right? We don't have to make money out of every bit of content that we make. We don't have to make sparkling perfect stuff all the time or be promoting something. We might just go on there and have a laugh and meet some people on the other side of the world and have a chat with them. I think some people that are kind of bemoaning the fact that it's changed have just put too much emphasis on the whole, building a community to sell something, whether that's digital product, physical product, whatever it might be, their services. And this stuff doesn't have to be about that, okay? Ooh, ran over.
I agree 100%. I love this rant you're on right now. We so need this because I think people have focused too much on the business side of things. And why are we on social media? To be social, to meet people, to talk, have conversations. It doesn't have to always revolve around something you buy, something you sell. Let's just connect and make it more about humanity.
Absolutely. One that isn't going so well, though, it would appear, is Amazon AMP. Now, we haven't spoken about Amazon AMP for a while, mainly because it seemed so much behind closed doors, really. They were sort of open exclusively to creators and then seemed to open their doors to some people, but not others. It was a difficult platform to kind of get into and take part in and create for. There was a piece that I found this week in Business Insider, which when I found it wasn't behind a paywall, and then I've gone back to look at it today and it is behind a paywall. So I'm really sorry about the fact it's on a paywall. I try not to do that because then you guys can't go and check it out when we put it in the nest. But essentially there was a sudden leadership change at AMP, which sparked a whole load of questions from the employees. From the sounds of the article, they basically put together a whole list of things that they wanted answered at their weekly town hall. They were saying things like there's no direction, AMP isn't making any money, there are projects on hold, there have been budget cuts. Apparently they've missed their monthly active users goals continuously. The staff cuts over there where they kind of slashed the staff in half, obviously haven't helped that either. So yeah, obviously an awful lot of questions around AMP and its future, and people asking kind of what's next for it, really, what's on the roadmap. I don't think there are any answers to that particularly, but it was interesting to see that in the article. What I did do before it went behind the paywall was to copy and paste some of it so I could read it out. So it said, some had questioned the general appeal of the live radio business and wondered if the voice-only platform is still a viable market. During the pandemic, live audio apps like Clubhouse gained massive traction, spawning the launch of similar apps like Twitter Spaces. However, the popularity waned and Clubhouse recently pivoted to a group audio messaging app. So again, a little bit like I've just said about how Clubhouse did reorganise themselves. Potentially, this is the employees of AMP saying that we haven't reorganised ourselves, and is there really a market for what we do anymore? So I found that a really interesting read, and I'm really sorry that you can't read it, but hopefully I've explained it enough that it makes some sense.
Yeah, you explained it really well. I think it's just crazy that Amazon, who is very well funded, did not put more resources into this. They could have been a major player, I think, when it came to social audio. So I don't know. So it's a real shame, just like with Spotify. They both had so much potential a few years ago.
They did. And I think the problem with Amazon in a lot of ways is that they work across so many different things that they do now. A bit like Elon wants this to be the everything app. Well, Amazon's trying to be the everything, right? So it's not just e-commerce anymore. It's Alexa, it's everything, it's all the things. It's deliveries and you name it, it's food, it's shops, it's all the things. And I know that Paul Armstrong's in the space. He does a fantastic weekly newsletter about what did Amazon do this week. Please do drop the link somewhere, Paul, because it is awesome over on Substack. And I'm sure he would say similar, that while they do all of these things, it's all very siloed. It's not as joint up as you think it would be. So, I mean, one of the things they were saying in this meeting apparently is that AMP isn't as closely linked to Amazon Music as they would want it to be. Now, that seems like a no-brainer, right? Because if you've got these hosts who are putting on live broadcasts, essentially, relying on a whole library of music, then surely Amazon Music is the place to go for that, right? So, a bit like Spotify not having the joined-up thinking, it feels like Amazon don't have the joined up thinking. I'm not so surprised at Amazon not having that joined up thinking, unfortunately. I think they work in, very, very siloed ways over there. But interesting to see someone writing something about it anyway. We hadn't heard about it for quite some time.
Yeah, it has been very quiet over there. Now, you came across something really cool. I cannot wait to hear you talk about our next item.
Well, I have to thank Paul Armstrong for this one as well, because he also does another newsletter, which is about what did OpenAI do this week. And he actually tipped me off on this one about ChatGPT introducing voice. So essentially, we'll be able to talk to ChatGPT and give our prompts and then hear a response. They are using Whisper, which is the OpenAI open source speech recognition model, and they will be turning text into speech using these voice actor modelled voices, so as human as they can kind of get them at the moment. And equally the other way back, they'll be converting speech into text as well. Now, it says that Plus and Enterprise users are going to get to try this out over the next few weeks. So it's not something that I've had a go at particularly yet, but I did see in the little video, it's a very recognisable UI. So you've got a red button essentially, and you can either tap or hold that while you speak your prompt into the app. Then you release that to process your prompt, and it will then give its response, which you will hear. So very interesting. I'm super interested in whether or not our common sense filters will work. I mean, maybe people aren't already using common sense anyway with the text version of this, but will our common sense filters still work in terms of hearing the output coming back to us? Or do we trust it more because we're hearing this human-like voice telling us the information? And it's an interesting one. I guess the way that we interact with ChatGPT, I kind of expected it would move on into kind of voice and audio, but maybe not this quickly. So it's interesting to see them sliding right over there right now.
Yeah, it's very interesting. We'll definitely be keeping a watchful eye out for this one.
A big thank you to our sponsors, Zealous.
I love Zealous. This has been one of the coolest tools that we've come across, and so we just had to make them a sponsor. If you're like us and you're doing spaces, maybe even podcasts, this tool makes it so easy to repurpose the content. So you can use it like audiograms. Suze, I love how you keep creating these awesome audiograms after our space ends, and it's such a great way to keep the conversation going, take little snippets and put it out there.
We've wanted to create audiograms for all the different episodes that we've done over the last 2 years, and it just takes up more time. But Zealous has made it really straightforward. And actually this week, my new thing that I checked out with them is their new AI tools. So actually what they're testing out, it's in beta over there at the moment, but you can ask it to suggest where chapter headings should go within your audio, and also to create things like show notes and blog posts from the transcript of your audio, which it can create for you, all of which is super useful.
Yeah, go check it out at allthingsaudiopodcast.com/zealous. They have a free trial. Highly recommend it. We both did the free trial, Suze and I, and we fell in love with it.
They are going to close Google Podcasts. Now, this was something I was waiting for them to announce. You know, we know that YouTube have been thinking about podcasting, I'm going to say, because it's taken them an awfully long time to actually actively do anything about podcast. But yeah, the news has come out this week, read it in TechCrunch, that they are going to be shutting the Google Podcasts app in November 2024. They're going to migrate the listeners that are using Google Podcasts over to YouTube Music. They've got a migration tool, a little wizard thing that's going to apparently make that really whizzy and not going to be a problem for us. And you know, they're basically shutting that down. Now, it has been left to fade for the last 18 months or so. As I say, the minute we heard YouTube were going to be taking podcasts on in a big way, I figured that Google weren't going to therefore become their own competitor, if you like, by having Google Podcasts as well. There's not much to write home about over on Google Podcasts at the moment. And I just hope that the transition for people listening, you know, doesn't kind of upset people's figures moving ahead. Let's hope that YouTube can pull their socks up and get YouTube Music working properly so that we've got RSS feeds working, which they're not at the moment, and also so that it's rolled out further, because at the moment, podcasts in YouTube Music are only available in the US. So we need RSS feeds working and a global rollout, and that'll be great. So as long as they can get all that done by November next year, when they're going to apparently close Google Podcasts, then everything will be fine. However, the amount of time it has taken them just to get the podcasts into the YouTube Music app does make me a little bit apprehensive as to whether or not it will really all happen within 12, 13 months, right?
Right. And I did a post yesterday. I took the one from Matt Navarra, the same article that you were sharing about Google Podcasts that shut down in 2024. And I just did a quote post and said, does anyone here listen to podcasts in Google? Now, I'm not on Android. I guess if I had an Android, I would. My podcast player of choice is not even Apple, it's Overcast. I've been a huge fan of Overcast. And I've been listening to podcasts for a very, very long time. But Apple Podcasts, in my experience, is either really, really good or really, really bad. And whenever it gets really bad and I don't like it, I go to Overcast. And this time around, I've stayed with Overcast for years. I never went back to Apple. So, it's interesting how it's a preference. And if you're a podcaster and you go look at your stats, I always think it's interesting to see, well, how are people listening? Because it'll let you know. I mean, on podcasts that I do, I sometimes see Google, not very often, but I wanted to pose the question yesterday in my feed because I was just curious, just in general, how many people in my community use it. And it's a bunch of comments I have in the nest. It'll be in the show notes for those listening to the replay or the podcast. It's interesting because a lot of people said, oh yeah, I use this on my Android. And then plenty of people are like, what's that? It's like, I didn't know Google had podcasts. So
yeah, I mean, I think it relates a lot to the devices as well, right? So iPhones flood the market. So everybody has automatically got a default Apple Podcasts on there. And unless you go and download a different podcast player because you're unhappy with the way that Apple Podcasts works, then you're going to listen to podcasts on Apple Podcasts, right? Whereas if you're on Android, you don't have that. So yeah, that's kind of the split between it. I guess people on Android, generally you've got Spotify. Obviously that's, massive and has got an awful lot of people listening on both devices over there. But for people on Android who don't have access to Apple Podcasts, that's where that choice comes in. And, Google say that they're going where people are listening. Edison research still shows that there's a huge number of people that are listening to podcasts on YouTube. And so therefore there's no reason for them to particularly have this other platform with another name in the mix. So it does make sense for them to consolidate it all. But yeah, I just find it amazing how long it has taken them to really get off the ground with it. I mean, they put out a 100-page PDF booklet about how great, this was going to be for creators and podcasters and everything else about 18 months ago. And yet still, it's all still very US centric and very difficult to actually easily get your podcast up there, unless you do it manually. I automate our podcast going up on YouTube from Headliner, which creates the audiogram for us. But if I didn't do that, I would have to manually put each episode together and put it up. And that's effort. We said at the beginning of the show, and we were talking about Zealous, we don't need any more effort. It's already a lot to pull together the content, put together the show, do the editing, put together some marketing assets. You don't need that extra layer. So they do really need to start making sure that creators can upload their RSS feeds over there so it's an automatic thing. And then we'll see how it takes off then, but I'm still very apprehensive.
No, I totally understand. I love this next piece of news you came across, a partnership between OpenAI, which is ChatGPT, and Spotify, so that podcasters will be able to clone their voices and translate them to other languages. This is fascinating to hear about.
Yeah, so this is heading back into the realms of voice, a little like the ChatGPT story we were talking about earlier. So basically, the podcast hosts will be able to clone their voices and then create what they're saying in a non-native language. So a language that they can't speak, but it will be their voice, their intonation, their rhythm. So I think, we worked on this a little bit when I was working in voice tech, and with enough modeling data from someone's voice, you can create that model and then apply it to whatever text you give it. So if that text is in a different language, then it speaks the language, and it is pretty incredible. So Spotify have partnered with OpenAI to get this to happen. French was meant to be the first example that they pushed out, I believe, of the 3 podcasts that they're trialling it on. So they're trialling it on the Lex Fridman podcast, Armchair Expert, and Diary of a CEO with Stephen Bartlett. And midweek, the news was those were going to be available in French, Spanish and German. I think the day they actually put the release out, there was a little note on, I think it might have been the Diary of a CEO, saying it was coming late. The French version was coming later. And I thought, oh, that's not so good. But today I did manage to find 3 Spanish episodes that they've obviously put together, and I put those into a thread. So those 3 episodes of those 3 shows have been created in this way. It is a trial and a pilot phase at the moment. The blog says that the pilots are going to be available to free and premium users, which is everybody, right? But I think, ultimately when they roll it out, can we really expect that everybody's going to be able to listen to these in all languages for free? I don't think so. I kind of feel like, for a start, is this going to be open to all podcasters and all creators? I don't think so. I think probably they're Spotify exclusive people that they sign up, because what a great coup for them, right? We can turn your podcast into any language or whatever. We want you to sign up with us and not go somewhere else. I think that, unfortunately, will be the way that it goes. And I think for listeners, it probably will become a premium subscribed thing. So you can only hear it if you've paid for the higher tier content. That is all just totally out of the top of my head. I might be totally wrong, but I do feel like that's where it might head. However, it does show that the technology is out there. It shows that it is available, and eventually, I'm sure it will become more available via podcast hosts. All the AI stuff, the cleanup tools. Buzzsprout now can master your audio if you want it to when you upload an episode. You've got Captivate putting in all sorts of different dynamic stuff and using AI. There are lots of different tools out there that were not available to the general public and the grassroots podcaster a few years ago that are now. So what this does show is that it's out there and it's available, and it could well become something that we could all do with our podcasts in future. And wouldn't that be amazing to be able to make our podcasts available further around the world and for people to be able to listen in their own language? What do you think of it, Madeline?
Yeah, I think that's such a great idea. I would love to see that. I think the only issue, the article from The Verge, for them to have the headline say Spotify is going to clone podcasters' voices and translate them to other languages, I think clone was not the right word to use, because that sounds creepy to me, like, oh, AI is going to clone my voice. I love the idea of what they're trying to do here, but I think for this particular article, they should have refrained from that terminology, because then you get to the tagline underneath: a partnership with OpenAI will let podcasters replicate their voices to automatically create foreign language versions of their shows. I think this is a huge plus. I think this is something that's just going to open up the world even more for people with audio. So I'm looking forward to this. I just don't want to think of myself being cloned, right? Who wants their voices cloned?
I see what you mean. And actually, when I shared the ChatGPT one over on LinkedIn earlier in the week, some of my voiceover friends were like, nope, this isn't happening. Like, why do people want to use, cloned voices? And even if they're modeled on voice actors, it's not the right thing to do. And so that terminology, you're right, does make people more resistant to it. But yeah, I think it's probably more kind of tech terminology. Certainly it's something that I would have heard when I was working in the industry, was that to, take samples to create the model was basically cloning somebody's voice. But in this sense, it's with permission of the podcaster, obviously, is going to do it themselves, or is, their production team are going to do it. It's not quite the same as just Spotify literally going in and cloning people's voices left, right and centre from different podcasts that they've got access to, which is what that headline might suggest. So yeah, I see what you're saying.
It's a little clickbaity. The Verge, why are they doing that? Because when you read the rest of the article, it's like, what a great idea. I'm excited about it. But yeah, you can really turn people off by just your words. And I think that was just a poor choice of words. Thank you to all of our speakers who came on and shared so much great stuff. And we're available in all of your favorite podcast apps. We're out there, All Things Audio. You can also go to allthingsaudiopodcast.com as well.
You certainly can. And you can catch us here on Twitter and use the hashtag AllThingsAudio, and we'll pick that up throughout the week. So that's it for this week. But thank you so much to everyone that's been here in the space with us, and those of you listening. And we'll catch up with you next week.
Bye, everybody.